going hunting, just me, my hound, and my gun. Chasing them deer, rabbit, and squirrel, now that's my kind of fun. I like going fishing too, I'll go on any whim, looking for the big bass, the poppy, and the brim. Just give me a wide open field to walk through. Give me an ocean so deep. I want to ride the longest river in the world, or maybe climb the highest mountain peak. Like going down to the fishing hole, buddies and me and my old cane pole. Bait them hooks and wet them lines, it's a life I love so fine. It's almost supper time, you'd think the world was mine.
Folks, I'm in Dr. Bob Shepard from Carrollton, Alabama. I'm in his deer study, and that's what it is, a deer study. That's what Bob does, is study the habits of deers, and he hunts them. And Bob, I understand you've taken between 250 and 275 deer. How many you got in that pile right up there on the wall?
Oh, probably 150, I guess. I cut up a lot of them over the years and given them to friends to use for rattling antlers. But probably 150.
All right, well, let's get into this, and I want everybody listening close, because this man knows how to take deer. Now, Bob, what's this gizmo you got in your hand here?
It's just a simple, very inexpensive weather radio. It's a crystal run, so it's set off the 3 stations that give the weather for this general area of the state, West Alabama and East Mississippi. First thing I do in the morning when I get up to go deer hunting is to decide where I'm going to hunt, and even if I'm going to hunt that day, is to see what the wind direction is going to be and the wind velocity. And that's where a weather radio comes in, because it'll give you the predictions for the night before and the next day, and what changes may occur during that period of time. So I'll take the wind direction for that day and then go to a map and determine, depending on the wind direction for that day, where I'm going to hunt.
High in the lower 40s, wind becoming northwest 10 to 20 miles an hour. The chance of precipitation, 70%. Thursday night, snow likely, low near 20, chance of snow 60%. Friday, mostly cloudy and cold, high in the mid-30s. Forecast for the Tuscaloosa, Aliceville, Greensboro, and Livingston areas of West Alabama tonight. Increasing clouds, low in the mid-30s, easterly wind 5 to 10 miles an hour. Thursday, rain likely, high in the upper 40s, turning colder in the afternoon. Rain may be mixed with snow by late afternoon. Wind becoming northwest 10 to 15 miles an hour. The chance of precipitation, 60%. Thursday night, a 40% chance of snow, low in the lower 20s. Friday, mostly cloudy and cold, high in the upper 30s.
All right, now let's do a for real here, Bob. Let's say that you've got your wind direction, and take a hypothetical wind direction. Well, first of all, tell them what kind of map this is.
All right, there are several different types of maps, but these are aerial photographs. The black and white aerial photographs like this come generally through the Soil Conservation Service in the county in which you live. Sometimes, when you're really lucky, you can get infrared color photographs through some of the paper industry companies, and they give you satellite color photographs of the same area. So this area that we're looking at here in color is the same as what we're seeing here in black and white. It just gives you 2 different perspectives. So you can tell a lot more about the terrain and what kind of foliage and trees are on the surface on the color photograph than you can on the black and white. We'll look at some of that.
All right, now you've got your wind direction and all of that. Now, how much time do you spend on these maps, Bob? Where do you start on a new area? Let's play like you was going to hunt this for the first time. What would you do?
Well, you just have to pick a general area, and there are certain things that I look for. Bottlenecks primarily is the hunting technique I use most frequently.
Bottlenecks.
So if I can choose an area, just look, for instance, right here. This is a slough off the river, just a dead run off the river. And this is the dike that goes around the outside of a spoil area, common on the Tenn-Tom Waterway. Now look at this little area right here between the edge of this slough and the edge of that spoil area.
Well, that looks like a bottleneck.
You can see that it necks down there, and yet there's a big area of timberland in here and a big area of timberland back in here. So any deer that wants to get from here to here is generally going to be funneled through that little narrow neck. Now, so I know right off the bat that barring something that I don't see on the map, like all this has been clear cut, that's going to be a good place.
Before you ever get there.
Before I ever get there, I can know from the map that that's probably going to be a good place. So I'll then have to go look at it and see if there really is movement through there, like I suspect there would be looking at the map.
All right, you got a green dot on it. Does that mean a super good spot or an average spot, or there ain't no deers there?
That means that I've had a lot of different systems for how to label my maps, and the green dots are just another one of the ways that I numbered them. Finally, the actual method I use now is that I put a thumbtack in the place, because good spots don't stay good spots forever. That's a good spot only if this area has not all been clear cut. So I like to be able to move my spots and change them about. And then this serves another purpose. I have, as you can see, a number printed on these thumbtacks.
Mm-hmm.
So I can take that number, and once I've chosen, let's just say I've chosen that I'm going to hunt from that area today, and I have a number 25 pin stuck in it, then I can leave a note for my wife that day that before I ever leave here, I'm going to be in stand number 25 in the morning, and I'm going to be in stand number 17 this afternoon, or I'm going to be in stand 17 all day long. That way, if I fall out and hanging by my left ankle, I don't hang there but one evening before my wife knows exactly where.
And you've explained this to her about.
Oh, yes, very much so.
So she knows where. Now that's a safety precaution, Bob. We need to stress, don't we?
I hunt so much alone, and I think most deer hunters who really do a good job of it tend to be loners. They tend to hunt by themselves because it's hard to. I like the camaraderie of having other people, but it definitely diminishes the quality of the likelihood of you taking a deer on one-on-one terms if you have other people with you. So I tend to hunt alone, and therefore not many people know where I hunt or how I hunt. And I need to leave some way that if something happens to me, that there's a lot of woods down there, and I could spend days, if not weeks, before anybody found where I happened to be, scattered over 5,000 or 6,000 acres.
Mm-hmm.
So this way I have a method of letting my wife know at least 2 or 3 choices of where I will probably be that day.
All right, now let's talk about this green spot. Have you ever shot a deer there?
I've killed several there, but that's primarily a place I use during the bow season because this area is a wide open hardwood bottom strip between this spoil area and the top of this slough. So by the time the gun season comes in, the deer have long since been pushed out of those open areas, and it's not.
So it's an early season place.
It's an early season place.
Okay.
Now that's another interesting aspect of that place. As you can see, any bottleneck that is funneled by water primarily, or something that's going to have impenetrable brush in it that you can't go through, how are you going to get to it without going right through at least half of the area where you expect the deer to be?
And that's going to mess you up,
It's going to mess you up. So commonly when I hunt that area during the bow season, I put my boat in the river and come up the river, come around and come up this slough and go to it.
Now, you're heavy duty on sneaking up on them in a boat, ain't you?
Well, it's just by necessity. There's just no other way to get to that spot without spooking at least half of the deer that you might have a chance to kill.
All right, now,
without coming to it by water.
What wind direction would you look for that?
Well, look at that. If I were going to approach it from here and I came up and went out on the land, then I want to stop right on the edge of the slough so that I can see across this thing. The deer movement is going to be this way, east and west. North is straight up on this map. So I want to stop right on this edge, and I would want some kind of north wind. North, northeast, or northwest. That way it would be blowing my scent this way, and the deer could come and go in front of me without ever smelling me.
Now, you heavy duty on that wind business, aren't you?
I don't think there's anything that is any more important than knowing the wind direction for effectively taking deer.
Now, if that radio told you that there was a south wind due south, I mean going from south to north,
Then I would never go to that place.
there's a whole bunch of places would be culled in, wouldn't there?
That's right.
What's your best general wind that you've been able to hunt most of your spots on?
Well, I don't really think it makes any difference in terms of deer moving more during one particular wind. What really is more important is the temperature. When you have south wind, it's generally hot. Deer don't like it when it's hot. They don't move nearly as much when it's hot weather. So the north winds tend to be more productive, but it's because north winds mean colder weather. And the deer tend to do better. They move more when the weather is colder. Bitter cold is bad. I don't like 5 and 10 degree weather in this area. That tends to shut them down.
What's good, 30 to 40?
Well, I'd say anything from 20 to 45 degrees. That's a good general area. Now, during the bow season, it doesn't have to be nearly as cold. In other words, just a drop from an average of 65 degrees down to 55 degrees would be good enough. That would spur a good bit of movement if you had that happen. But as it gets further and further into the winter, I kill most of my deer the latter part of the season in January, and particularly most of the better deer. And you're going to have colder weather during that period. And if it gets up into the 50s during January, that's terrible hunting.
I see.
Deer just don't move as much.
All right.
Outdoors with Archie Phillips is now available on video cassette, like Volume 11, Deer. From a deer driving show with Robert Gardner to a most unique deer rattling show with Joel Davis, which shows you the territorial traits of deer. Lions Club Deer Drive gives you a good charity show with plenty of action. An afternoon deer drive with Robert Gardner is a fine deer show in Hardwood Bottoms. So ask for deer at your local video store or nearby sporting goods dealer.
All right, Bob, now we've wandered right in through here in this area here, and you stopped at this tree. What's significant about this place right here?
Why would I pick this one and not one off out here or one over there?
Yeah.
Well, if you look generally, this is the kind of place that I generally set up to hunt is going to be some kind of bottleneck. In other words, an area where the terrain narrows the deer down so that their movement is through a small area.
Okay.
Right. If you look right out this way, you see the opening to the edge of a field. And then right back over this way, 75 yards, is the edge of a river.
Uh-huh.
All right, we have a neck here where the edge of that field and the edge of the river come close to each other, and we have a strip of woods between them. Now we're over towards one edge so that I can be downwind, have the deer move back and forth at their normal movement pattern through this area, and me be downwind of them.
All right, now let me ask you this. We're down in a holler sort of here. Do you pick a low spot over a high spot?
No, I get where I can be downwind of the deer.
And in other words, you just as apt be up on the side of a hill as not, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
I may be down in the bottom looking up a hill. It doesn't matter as long as I'm downwind of the deer.
Okay. Now
I want them to be able to move in front of me and never be able to smell me. So once I've decided that this is the general area that I'm going to hunt, then I want to pick a tree that is over towards one side of that neck.
to get you kind of off the highway a little bit, right?
Exactly. I don't want to be sitting where they're going to walk right under me.
Uh-huh.
Even when I'm bow hunting, I want to get off over to one side.
I see. All right, now what's the next thing we're going to do with this tree here?
Okay. You got to get up the tree somehow to put your stand up. Now, climbing tree stands work great. A lot of people use them. A lot of people kill deer out of them. I just don't care for them. They're too heavy for the kind of hunting that I do, and they make more noise going up and down the tree than I like to make when I'm hunting. So I use two different other types of tree stands. I personally think the safest tree stand on the market, and probably as good as there is a ladder. And I would prefer to hunt out of a ladder.
In fact, you have hunted out of a ladder
Exactly.
a good bit, hadn't you?
The reason I don't is because when I put a ladder up, everybody hunts out of it but me. So I had to go back to a system where everybody's not hunting where I'm hunting, because even if they don't kill anything, they still are there, and they happen to be there with the wind wrong, and the wind's blowing their scent in, and the deer smells them, they're going to avoid that area for a day or two.
So then when you get ready to go, you're in trouble,
I
ain't
come
you?
in the next day and hunt all day and can't figure why I didn't see anything.
So you do like ladders, though, if you don't have anybody
Yes,
messing with
if
them.
I had an area that I could hunt that nobody else was going to hunt on, I'd unquestionably always hunt from a ladder.
I see.
I honestly don't believe the deer pay a bit of attention to them once they've been there for a day or two and they get used to them. I don't think it matters. So I use other types of stands to make me more portable and to keep the places where I hunt quiet. Basically, if I find a good bottleneck like this where I kill deer consistently year after year, I don't even tell my mother about it.
Well, show us how you set up there,
So
Bob.
once you've decided which tree you're going to get in, and I usually decide that in advance, scouting prior to the season, you got to get up the tree to put the stand up somehow. Okay, and there are a whole bunch of different ways to do that, and you really have to use whatever is legal in your particular area. When I hunt in the Northeast or in Canada, I use rope-on steps to get up the tree because they're the only type that are legal. In most of the southern states, I use conventional screw-in steps. When I'm hunting on my own land, I use a thing like this. It's a little drill where you actually drill a small hole.
Now, that doesn't hurt nothing either, does it, Bob?
This hole will grow up every season. I've got an oak tree in my yard that I use to practice with my tree stands with and to show other people how to use them, that I bet I've drilled 200 holes in over the past 10 years, and the tree is just as healthy as it always was. The holes grow completely over and close off.
All right, well, what
After
size
every
little
season.
drill is that now, Bob?
The bit is a 3/8 inch bit.
And it's just a little gizmo that you just...
It folds itself in like that and completely closes off, has a handle to turn it by, and a little hook to hook it on my belt so I don't lose it.
Boy, that's a neat little
Going
gadget.
up and down the tree.
I see. All right, now what do you do after you drilled them all out then?
All right, once I've drilled them out, then I'll put the stand up.
Okay.
All right, let me go ahead and put another hole in.
Outdoors with Archie Phillips is now available on video cassette, like Volume 13, Turkey Techniques. Jerry Gardner, a well-accomplished turkey hunter, shows how to select an area to hunt, how to set up a blind, and many calls from the beginner to the most professional caller. This video shows 3 turkeys harvested using these techniques. So if you're in the mood for turkey hunting, Turkey Techniques is the video for you. Ask for Turkey Techniques at your local video store.
All right, now, Bob, this is what, a 3/8 bolt?
That is a 5/16.
5/16. All right, what's your drill?
The drill is a 3/8. The important thing about this bolt is that it's a grade 8 industrial bolt. If you use a conventional grade 3, it'll bend on you. If you use a grade 5, it'll bend, and the grade 8 is the only one in this size that'll hold.
All right, where you get them at?
You can order them through a hardware store.
Grade 8
Grade 8,
industrial bolt.
right.
I got you. And they're about, what, 6 inches long?
They're 6 inches, and I cut a little bit of the thread off.
Okay.
The thread is the weakest part, and I just want enough thread on the end to make sure the bolt doesn't slip out when I'm coming up and going up and coming down.
Once Bob has gotten his steps into position and climbs up, he puts his stand up and locks it onto the tree. He prunes limbs away from him and enables him to shoot and move without drawing attention to himself, which will spook the game. But you need coverage to break up your silhouette and to provide coverage. Once the safety rope is secured with a bowline, he is ready for the hunt.
As you can see, the string is pointing towards me. In other words, it's blowing back towards me. That means I'm facing into the wind like we had talked about earlier. I want the deer to be upwind of me.
I see. In other words, you got that piece of string on every one of your arrows?
I keep it on every arrow.
I see.
And it's out away from me, so the turbulence from around the tree doesn't mess it up and make it look like it's blowing the wrong direction.
I see.
Now, if I had a deer off out here in front of me, I know that if that string ever swings around and is pointing in his
toward
direction, all the deer I hunt are afraid of these strings. when that string points in their direction, that means it's carrying your scent towards the deer, and it's going to spook him every time.
You better either get your shot off or forget it.
Right. If the wind is blowing off in this direction and the deer is coming towards where the wind's blowing, I know I've got to shoot him before he gets to where that string is pointing. And that's important when you're bow hunting, more so than gun hunting, because as the deer gets closer and closer, it gets more and more critical as to whether he may get the wind wrong and smell you. So you've constantly, from the time you have the deer come in sight, you be recalculating, okay, if the wind stays like it is now, I'm going to shoot him when he gets right there. And you keep rethinking that all the way. It keeps you from getting buck fever.
In other words, you keep your eye on the string right there.
That's right. In other words, I would normally be standing just like this with the bow up, the bow against my leg, and holding it with my finger on the string and ready to draw.
Look, that wind shifting a little now.
Right. If it did that and the deer was standing off out that way, regardless of whether it was the right time to draw, I know it's fixing to be over. So I just go ahead and draw and take my chances as to whether he's going to run. I just take my chance, go ahead and draw and try to get the shot off.
Outdoors with Archie Phillips is now available on video cassette, like Volume 14, Survival on Wild Edibles. J.T. Dabbs, a wild edible expert, shows you how to find these plants in the wild and how to properly prepare them into a tasty feast. Archie also shows how to build primitive fires with fire by friction. For an educational tour through Mother Nature, ask for Outdoors with Archie Phillips, Survival on Wild Edibles at your local video store.
Now, Bob, this is what, this last year's deers?
That's this past season.
This past season's deer. And the system you used to take these deer was what we've been talking about. Is that right?
That's right. They're all taken exactly by the methods that we've been talking about.
And you just actually sit here in your study and pinpoint a section that you're going to hunt. And you go in there and make sure there's deer there.
That's right.
And you hunt a specific deer or what comes through that you know is going to come through. Is that right?
I spend a lot of time poring over this map with a magnifying glass, looking for detail of what kinds of places I may want to hunt. And then I go to the woods and see if the sign is there to tell me that the deer are really using that area. Then as I learn more about the way the terrain is laid out by walking over it, then I come back to the map and look at it again. Go through that process over and over and over and over.
So you got it memorized.
Until it's fixed in my mind.
And then you go out there and do it.
Right.
And that's the results of it. We're super good, and y'all stay tuned again for some more Outdoors with Archie Phillips.
Just me, my hound, and my gun. Chasing them deer, rabbit, and squirrel, now that's my kind of fun. I like going fishing too, I'll go on any whim, looking for the big bass, the poppy, and the brim. Just give me a wide open field to walk through. Give me an ocean so deep. I want to ride the longest river in the world, or maybe climb the highest mountain peak. Like going down to the fishing hole, my buddies and me and my old cane pole. Bait them hooks and wet them lines, it's the life I love so fine. It's almost supper time, you'd think the world was mine.
Well, folks, I'm down at Carrollton, Alabama, in the deer study of Dr. Bob Shepherd. And Bob's one of the best they are. Now, Bob, I picked up this 10-point drop over in the area you hunt. And before we get through, I want you to explain to me how you'd stalk up this deer and take him from where I'm going to show you on your map that this drop came from.
Well, Archie, I obviously don't know how to take him or he'd be up here with the rest of us.
How many have you taken in your lifetime, Bob?
I'm not sure exactly, probably 250, 275.
That's a lot of deer. So you folks that ain't ever took one or took very few, pay close attention, and we're going to get into some real, sure enough, how-to deer hunting with Dr. Shepherd. Let's do it, Bob.
All right.
Show us your markings and some of the other things you look for, Bob.
Well, one of the things I've tried to draw in over the years, you can see these red markings. Those are just general movement patterns that the deer in that particular area use.
And you observed these, right?
Observe. Those are drawn in. As you can see, some of them go out like this to a dead end. That doesn't mean the deer always run out there and stop. That just means I don't know where they go from there.
I see.
They begin to fan out in several directions, and I can't tell where they're going to or coming from beyond that point. But some places are reliable. You can see this movement pattern through here. Stand like this, I've taken 25 or 30 bucks out of that.
That one
stand.
place right there.
One place, just a little narrow strip of woods between two fields. And that's another kind of bottleneck. It's similar to the one we looked at over here. This one is bordered by water on one side and a big dike from the spoil area on the other. This one is bordered on one side by a field and on the other side by a field.
So in other words, they're migrating out of this big air coming through here to get on over there, right?
That's right. The thing that makes this area, I think, so productive is one that the terrain is a little bit thicker than this one is, and on either end of this bottleneck is a large area with very thick undergrowth and another large area with very thick undergrowth. So the deer have two bedding areas with a fairly heavy undergrowth area of movement that they can move safely through. And I've gone into these areas and get on one edge. If I wanted to hunt this, for instance, I could hunt it from this side using a north wind, or if the wind were blowing from the south, I could come in from this side and hunt it on the north edge of it.
I see.
Constantly keeping the deer movement pattern upwind from me.
Mm-hmm. All right, show me some more good spots. What's the little green marks here, Bob?
Years ago, these areas were food plots that were planted, and those are the general locations of the food plots. They're not there anymore, and I seldom ever hunt food plots. I have more confidence hunting in the woods than I do on a field.
Okay.
I've just been able to consistently take more deer from the woods than I am on fields. So those areas are just where green oats and wheat type food plots have been planted.
In other words, now you just take that same system and you move to, this is another section of land we have, right?
Right. This is a different area. These areas of green that I've colored in on the black and white map are areas of recently planted pines. Small pines, anywhere from 3 or 4 years old up to 5 or 6, maybe even 8 or 10 years old. And planted pines serve two purposes for deer. Once the overstory is closed, the deer bed in those areas, and then when they get out to move, they tend to skirt the edges of them. So if I can find a place like this where I'm between two areas of planted pines, then the movement pattern is going to be between them. And I'll set up on one edge or the other edge.
Will you be able to see over in here?
No, it's
Too
so thick you can't see in there. Now, it turns out that this area that I would hunt here, it is thick. It is a clear cut. These areas were planted with pines, and this was done by what's called a hardwood shear. They took a D9 bulldozer with a large cutting blade and just shaved everything off after the timber was cut at ground level. That is now grown back up into brambles and thicket and brush and briars, and it's so thick you can hardly walk through it, but the deer can.
I see.
So they use it to travel as the hunting pressure gets more and more tense. They use those thick areas to travel in. And they spend the day in them.
I see. So in other words, these thick areas is where they're going to be, and you're not going to be able to get in there and get on them.
Well, if you think about what the terrain is like in planted pines, If you have planted pines that are along the edge of a hardwood shear, then if you remember what it's like in pines that have been planted, say, that are about 8 years old, they've closed their overstory and there's nothing underneath. There's no browse of any kind, and yet the trees are high enough now that the deer don't use them to bed anymore. But you can walk at about head level through them. And I can use those. You're walking on quiet, usually soft pine straw. And I use those a lot of times to approach the edge of a clear cut that I'm going to hunt. So it gives you a quiet, effective way of getting to the edge.
He
of where
can't
the
see
deer
you
are.
either, can he?
That's right. He can't see you nor likely hear you. So as long as you keep him upwind of you from your approach, then many times you can use these planted pines to actually get to where you want to hunt quietly, and without the deer being able to see you or detect you otherwise.
I see. All right, now with all this information, what's your next step now?
Once I've gotten up, checked the wind direction, and decided, okay, stands 6 and 7 I haven't hunted in a week or two. I don't like to hunt the stands more frequently than about once a week at the most. And if I decide I'm going to go to one of those, and both of those could be hunted with a southwest wind, then I'll leave my wife a note and get in and make some coffee and gather all my stuff, planning to stay all day, planning to get in the stand. Usually when I get up and go, I plan to stay until it either gets dark or I kill a deer. So I take a sandwich and a thermos of coffee and a knapsack, and I stay with it all day.
And you don't take no deer scent?
I don't take any deer scent. I wish it worked, but I just never been able to convince myself that it's effective.
But that wind works, don't it?
So I use the wind in preference to trying to cover up my scent. I just try to keep myself downwind of where I expect the deer to be.
And Bob, you gave me an explanation of a deer being able to camouflage human scent, something about like a skunk you was telling me. What was that you said?
Well, you'd asked me why I was not a big fan of some of the cover-up scents, and I asked you, did you think you'd be able to sort out a skunk from amongst a group of nice-smelling ladies at a party? And you assured me that you thought that you could, and I'd have to say, I don't see why the deer can't sort us out as bad as we smell to them from amongst all the stuff that we try to cover our scents with.
Outdoors with Archie Phillips is now available on video cassette, like Volume 15, The Lost Art of Jigger Pole Fishing. Jigger pole fishing was a popular fishing technique of many old-timers, and Randy Howell has brought this extremely productive method to new heights. This video explains all the equipment needed and how to use it for an exploding topwater show. Each and every strike is seen as the fish actually takes the bait. So ask for Volume 15, The Lost Art of Jigger Pole Fishing, at your local video store.
Archie, this is primarily the stand I use during the gun season. I do bow hunt out of it some, but it's a better gun stand because it's comfortable enough I can stay all day.
Now, Bob, that just looks like a little old wooden something. Don't look like that holds you up.
Well, I took this very stand right here. It weighs 4 pounds, and hooked the straps and all to my tractor and lifted a 1,500-pound bale of hay with it.
Didn't hurt it?
It'll hold more than most stands.
I don't even see how that thing works.
These straps will hold about 6,000 pounds apiece.
All right, show me how that thing works.
All right.
And what was that little bag that comes with it?
Yes, just a little bag that's attached to the cushion that's sitting on the stand. Okay, and I carry all my stuff in it.
It looks like a parachute or something.
It's about right. Now, the way you carry the stand up the tree to hook it up is to put it on your back. Like that.
All right, now, is this one you're going to use pegs with?
Yeah. Again, it's used just like the lock-on type stand. It doesn't really matter how you get up the tree, whether you use rope-on type steps or whether you use the screw-in steps or whether you use these pull-out bolts with a drill. Doesn't really matter. The system works the same.
Okay.
Now, this strap serves 2 purposes. It has a hook on one end, hook on the other end, and a loop in here to attach your safety belt to. You put it on by putting it around your waist like this. Well, I got it folded.
In other words, you go ahead and put that on right now.
I put that on before I go up the tree, and I hook it on itself in there.
Let's see how you did that. Okay.
I use the same safety belt that I would use with the lock-on type of stand.
Okay.
Hooks in. Use a Chinese lock to go around the tree.
Okay.
All right. Now you have your pegs in the tree, and then you take the rope, and you want to size it sort of to the tree before you go up, because you want it to approximately fit the size of the tree, and it's going to go around and hook like that, and this is going to just hook into it. All right. I'll go ahead and put it up. Now again, that's a little bit too loose. I want to kind of tighten it up a little bit. Now I go up the tree, put my feet on the steps, and I would have this actually attached to me, like I can use it attached onto here or onto my pocket. Now I take my safety belt. Once I've climbed the tree, I want to hook my safety belt so that I'm leaning back against this wide belt. It's comfortable. You're safely attached to the tree. You got both hands free to put the other rope up with. Now with it already attached, put this around the tree. Once it's around, you may want to tighten it up just a little bit. If you do, you just like that. Okay?
Okay.
And then hook that. Now you catch your thumb, slide that off your shoulder. Now you can unhook your safety belt because you're now attached to the tree by the tree stand.
And that's where you sit.
And that's where you sit.
Now this is not a bow type stand, is it?
You can use it for a bow type stand. It really works better for a rifle stand. I killed 2 or 3 deer out of it this year just to convince myself that I could, and it works well, but I think it works better for gun hunting. Now,
Got your waistband now loose.
Now, if you're going to stay just a few hours, you really don't need anything else, but to make the stand perfectly safe, you hook this in here on both sides.
That gives you a back support.
So you got a back support. You can pull the back support down low, or you can pull it up high against the top of your back. If you suddenly become unconscious, you cannot fall out of the stand.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So you're here. You're not going to fall out. Once you're hooked up, you're not going to fall out of the stand.
Now, you can also move a little bit around that if a deer come a different angle too, can't you?
Now, I spend most of my time sitting down in this stand. If I see a deer and if he's close, I just go ahead and shoot him. But if he's far out away, and I figure I may want to maneuver, then I stand out from the tree. And to move so that I can aim in different directions, all I have to do is bend one knee or the other. If I bend my left knee without making any other movement, you see what it does to me.
Oh, yeah.
I can come around and shoot in any direction.
That's outstanding, Bob. All right, now show me how that gun fits on there.
Okay.
Outdoors with Archie Phillips is now available on video cassette, like Volume 16, Catfish. Jug fishing teaches you the art of catching catfish with quart jugs, while Jump Box shows a fast and easy way to set a trot line. Box fishing shows how to use slat boxes, and grabbing catfish shows the technique of catching catfish out of submerged logs. So ask for Catfish at your local video store or nearby sporting goods dealer.
I've got the tree to brace against, regardless of which direction the deer is. If the deer's off over here, I just come around like that, and I'm braced against the tree to shoot. I want to shoot from this side. I've got my arm against the tree. Got a good steady place to shoot from. If the deer is off behind me, I've still got I can still put my elbow against my strap, my other elbow against the tree, and I've got a good steady brace to shoot from. So I can shoot any direction with a brace.
And this is a rig you've been using now for several years, right?
Yes. This stand was actually a homemade stand that's designed by a friend of mine, Craig Thornton. Craig put all of the work that it takes into this stand to put it together and make it work. And then he and I, over the years, have changed all sorts of little things to make it work better. Now, there's these things make, and they have a little wing nut under there so you can tighten them into position. And you just rest you, if you want to drink coffee or do something else, you just put your gun in that stand. Now, it still won't fall out even if you do this. It's still right there.
Well,
It won't fall out.
That is slick.
No amount of moving around makes any difference.
That is slick.
And it's right there. So if you want to, I generally carry a bag with me that's got stuff, because when I get in this stand, I commonly will stay all day. So I want coffee and something to eat, sandwich for lunch.
Well, now you got a
With
little
me.
rope here. Do you just let your bag down, or do you just use that to let your gun down?
I go up the tree, get into position, having taken my bag and my gun and attached them to the rope, and then I pull them up after I get into position. That way I'm not trying to go up and down the tree with a bunch of stuff in my hands.
I see.
And get myself shot. There's one other trick. I have what's called what Craig refers to as a spreader bar, that is just a little stick that I can put right in here with a lot of clothes on. This stand begins to bind you right there. So I just take this thing and slip it right in there, and it brings this thing back out.
My goodness.
Opens it up to where you got more room. If I've got more clothes on and this needs to be longer, these little cross hatches on here are such that I can bring it down like this, and it gives me more room back here. So I have more room for more clothes.
So you got it all figured down to a gnat, hadn't you?
Right. This is the only stand I've ever hunted out of, and I think I've hunted out of virtually all of them on the market, that I can comfortably stay in a stand for 14 hours. Because you got the critical components to all the things that a race car has in it. You got a comfortable back support that's movable into different positions. You have a soft seat cushion to sit on that can change the angle depending on which way you're sitting. You can stand up or sit down with a minimum of movement. So you can change the tension on your body from one end to the other, and yet you can't fall out of it.
That's critical. I got one buddy that's got a disabled arm now, one with a dislocated shoulder, and some of my bow hunting buddies, they bad about falling out of trees.
It's easy to do. And as you can see with a bow, it's not quite as easy. Now,
You don't really recommend this for a bow, do you?
I'm not sure yet whether I'm going to switch over and hunt out of this exclusively. With a recurve bow, I had trouble with deer off in this area because the amount of movement that it takes to swing all the way around and get where you can shoot off in that direction, which I can do, is just too much movement.
For the deer.
For the deer. So what you have to do is bring your bow around and shoot from here, and this stuff then is in your way if you have a long-limbed bow like a recurve. Now my compound is short enough that I can bring it across here with a minimum of movement. And I believe when I go, I'm going to have to go back to a compound because I got a bursitis in my right shoulder shooting a heavier hold weight. I believe that the compound is going to work fine with this stand. So I may end up hunting out of it with the gun and a bow. But for right now, it certainly is ideal for a gun. You got everything you need. It's handy, it's comfortable, and it's safe.
In other words, when you start now there, you take your spreader out.
When I start out, I do exactly the opposite of when I came up. I'll take my gun and I'll attach the rope to it and let it down. to the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll undo my back strap and hook it to me, because it also will second as my safety belt.
Outdoors with Archie Phillips is now available on video cassette, like Volume 17, Turkey Calling with a Champion. Preston Pittman, one of the nation's best turkey callers, takes you to his favorite hunting area in Monticello, Mississippi. Preston shares with you how to predict turkey habits and territories and how to call turkeys from the beginner to the most professional. Preston also teaches you his midday hunting techniques. So ask for Outdoors with Archie Phillips, Turkey Hunting with a Champion at your local video store.
Now, Bob, this big, beautiful 10-point shed, I was right in there. Now, what do you know about that area right there? You think that's an area you've worked pretty good?
Well, there's an area just a little bit further over, as you can see these planted pines in here. This is all thick, heavy undergrowth and planted pines and a big beaver pond and a swamp. And the deer, I'm sure, where you found him in here is a fairly open bottomland. And I doubt very much he would have been found during the daytime hours there. So he's probably spending most of his time over here.
Okay, so since I've showed you this, now you'll sit down and work you up, because we know he was shed and he wasn't shot. That means he's still running around out there.
All right.
So you will take that information and go over these maps all over again, just like we've shown here, and you'll plot your course of action to take this deer, won't you?
I don't know of a better way of knowing that the deer is there than either seeing him after the season or finding his drops during the summer between two seasons.
All right, well, the information you folks have today from Dr. Bob Shepherd should make you a better hunter. Y'all stay tuned again for some more Outdoors with Archie Phillips.
Well, I like going hunting, just me, my hound, and my gun. Chasing them deer, rabbit, and squirrel, now that's my kind of fun. I like going fishing too, I'll go on any whim, looking for the big bass, the crappie, and the brim. Just give me a wide open field to walk through. Give me an ocean so deep. I want to ride the longest river in the world, or maybe climb the highest mountain peak. Like going down to the fishing hole, my buddies and me and my old cane pole. Bait them hooks and wet them lines, it's a life I love so fine. It's almost supper time, you'd think the world was mine.
And now for today's outdoor adventure, here's Archie Phillips.
Folks, I'm down in Carrollton, Alabama, in the deer study of Dr. Bob Shepherd. And Bob's taken between 250 and 275 deer with both bow and rifle. And this is one of his study maps. And Bob's going to show us the importance of this and how to use it to be a better deer hunter. Now, Bob, what are you talking about hunting pressure? Now, what do you call hunting pressure?
Well, it really wouldn't make any difference why people are in the woods. As far as the deer are concerned, they all have the same effect. By hunting pressure, I mean simply the number of warm bodies wandering around in the woods. The more of them you have, the more that tends to concentrate the deer into thick areas and make them become more and more and more nocturnal. Now, most of the people wandering around in the woods in the fall are hunters. So as it turns out, it's hunters who are putting on the hunting pressure. But it doesn't really, none of them have to carry guns. As far as the deer are concerned, they don't care and they don't know. They know that occasionally they have close calls when they begin to smell a lot of people in the woods. So hunting pressure is just simply the sudden addition of a lot of people.
But now, what if a fella was sitting in here and these deers are wandering around every morning, and he's in there on a tractor, plowing and running his truck all around in there? Don't they get used to those people in there?
Sure they do. As long as that the deer get used to the farmer on the same tractor in the same places day after day after day. Now the deer's not likely to be out there where he is. They're not dumb enough generally to do that unless they're in some kind of thick cover like corn that's being combined, then they'll stay out there. But they're not going to wander out into a field where a tractor is dissing open bottom land. At least generally they don't. Now, they don't get shot at very often from tractors. And a lot of people who drive bulldozers, bulldozing in the woods, shoot deer from those things because the deer get used to them for that very reason you're talking about. They adapt very quickly. But they also adapt to those of us who are walking through the woods that they can smell. Just take, for instance, if you had 4 or 5 people that wandered around in this plot of land all during the day one day looking for a place to hunt, all right? And let's say that I had a stand set up along the edge of this slough right here that I was planning to hunt tomorrow. Now, all those people wandering around in here today, when the deer tonight, when most of the deer activity actually takes place, they're going to wander around in there, and they can smell everywhere that those people went. They smell where every piece of clothing touches leaves and bushes. They can smell it. Now, they're not scared, obviously, but they know that the people were there. And what the deer will do is they respond to that as though it were pressure. In other words, they'll avoid that area for a day or two, maybe even 2 or 3 days. They may move and bed over in this thick area the next day or the next 2 or 3 days.
How far you figure they're going to move to avoid these people?
They'll move ever how far they have to.
In other words, it's not a miles don't make a lot of difference to them.
Telemetry tracking studies have shown that deer will move as far as 5 or 6 miles if they have to avoid intense hunting pressure. Now, they don't like that, and usually they don't move anywhere near that far. They are able to find thick cover where they can get, where they don't have repeated encounters with people without moving very far. So they're just going to seek out the thickest cover that they can find on the area, where you're hunting. And that's where most of the deer, particularly the bucks and larger bucks, are going to spend the daylight hours.
So in other words, if you see somebody that's in there in a 3-wheeler and you're fixing to go to your stand, and you got a pretty good idea which way they went, you just up and leave right then.
I may go to a different place, right?
Yeah.
If I think they have spooked the deer that I intended that I might see, then I'll go hunt another area.
I see.
Now, I use that hunting pressure a lot too, though, I'd have to say. As I had told you in the past, I'll tend to get in a place and planning to stay there all day. Now, the reason for that is because most of the other hunters in our lease don't do that. They tend to get in their stand about daylight, stay till about 9 o'clock, and then they get down and either scout or go eat breakfast. And then over in the afternoon after lunch, they come back, set up, and hunt again till dark. All right. The deer recognize that kind of pressure. Suddenly, for several hours, there are a lot of people in the woods, and then suddenly about 9 o'clock everybody disappears. The deer can respond to that, and they'll tend to do what moving they're going to do for that day during those midday hours. And I tend, because the hunting pressure on our club is intense, I tend to kill most of my deer in the middle of the day.
From 9 to 1.
Well, from 9 to 1, right.
Well, that's interesting. All right, let me ask you this, Bob. Now, you know I'm in there a lot of times hunting with my squirrel dogs. If I was down in here, let's say I was hunting down here by this duck pond. I see you got 4 or 5 things. Mm-hmm. Would you ever use my hunting and my dogs to your advantage by knowing the way these deer move?
Yeah, if you can take a general area and know how the deer, let's just say, most areas are going to have 2 or maybe 3 ways that the deer can completely get out of that area and leave and go to another thick area. All right, if I can take myself and one other person, and there are really only 2 exits to a large, say, a 30-acre thicket that you're going to squirrel hunt with the dogs in, then I'll put myself on one of those exits, somebody else on the other one.
And you already know this because these lines you got drawn.
Exactly. I know how the deer tend to move under pressure, and I'll know where to place myself and somebody else. Or if I'm by myself, I'll do it just by myself.
I see. Now, Bob, you've been scouting pretty much all year long, And you get real intense early season, but what about later on in the season? What kind of scouting do you do then?
Well, there's actually two general time periods that I use both for scouting and for where I'm going to hunt. For the bow season, I'll scout just like most everybody else does during the 2 or 3 weeks prior to the season and during the season. Primarily that's because I bow hunt over food a lot, like acorns. So I want to know which acorn trees are dropping acorns, so I'll know where to get. Toward the end of the season, as the hunting pressure begins to really get tense and the deer move more and more and more into thicker and thicker areas, it becomes more and more important to avoid those areas that I hunted during the open bow season, because the deer are generally now avoiding those open areas that were productive during the early part of the bow season and the bow season and the early part of the gun season. Now, the most effective technique for hunting, both looking at maps and using them to do scouting as well as going to the woods and looking, is actually after the hunting season goes out. February and March, before the foliage begins to pick back up. Now that's important for 2 reasons. One is that only during that time of the year is there enough of the foliage off of the trees that you can actually see well enough to get a feel for where the real thick areas are and where the deer are spending their daytime hours. The other reason that time is important is the deer have the least amount of food available to them during that time than they do any of the rest of the season except the late summer. All right? They have to move more. And yet there's no hunting pressure. There's nobody in the woods until turkey season comes in. So there's a period of time of almost 2 months there when you can go and look at both areas, look at the terrain, and look for tracks, for sign. And the tracks that you see during that period of time will have been made by deer during their normal movement patterns.
In other words, those are highways.
Those are regularly used highways that you can depend on for the following late December and January hunting. So most of the places that I'll hunt next year toward the end of the season, I will determine in the next 3 or 4 weeks this year, after the season goes out. In other words, I'll do most of my late season scouting for next year at the end of this season in February and March.
And you can just see real good, can't you, Bob?
You can see well. The deer are moving more than they usually do because they don't have as much food available and they're having to move more. So that the movement patterns that you're able to pick up by looking at tracks are reliable. They'll tell you where the deer are spending their time for late in the season next year. Also, late in the season, most of the hunters after the doe days are over at Christmas kind of get the new oar off the deer hunting, and everybody but the serious deer hunters quit deer hunting after Christmas, after those Christmas holidays are over. So I think the hunting pressure is a whole lot less in January, and I think that's why I kill more deer then.
Outdoors with Archie Phillips is now available on video cassette, like Volume 18, Louisiana Duck Hunting. Louisiana is gifted with the world's best flyaway and a cast of characters that provide that southern flavor. Our guests have harvested many ducks, and they bring their techniques home to you. You learn how to set decoys, and a calling lesson you'll never forget. So ask for Louisiana Duck Hunting at your favorite video store or nearby sporting goods dealer.
Bob, you want to touch on being able to shoot in a real thick place where you know there's deer, and you just got to make some arrangements to do it?
Well, I think the best example is about a 3-year-old cutover, and it's tough to see deer in those places. Now, the way I scout cutovers, the way I scout clear cuts, is I go around the edge, all the way around the edge of the clear cut, and try to get some general ideas of where the deer are going in and coming out. All right. Then I'll go back, I'll try to fix that in my mind on the map. Then I'll come back and look at my map and say...
That's where you use your compass to get a direction into that thick stuff and correlate it to your map, right?
I'll come back and look at the map, and then I'll decide, okay, there's looks like about 6 different areas that deer can come into and leave this clear cut. At least they do so according to the tracks. Then I'll put on some heavy clothes like a quail hunter would use, and I'll go into that area. This after the hunting season is over, and there's as little foliage on the trees as there's going to be. The bushes are beat down about as much as they're going to be any time of the year. I'll go into that clear cut, and if I have to, crawl, and I'll follow the sort of the route of least resistance, which is usually the route that the deer use. And I'll constantly stop with a pair of binoculars and sight back to the edges of the clear cut so that I can tell generally where I am relative to the edges. All right, I'll do that for every one of those places where the deer go and come into the clear cuts. And with that then, crossing back and forth all through the clear cut from different angles, I begin to get a feel for how the deer move around in the clear cut. All right. Then, once I've done that, and this may take, 8 or 10 trips, it may take 8 or 10 days of walking around in a single clear cut before I can begin to get a feel for where in that 50-acre or 100-acre clear cut the deer are actually spending most of the time. Because I can't just get up over and look down into 50 acres of clear cut. I can't cover but about 2 or 3 acres of it. So I don't want to sit over unproductive ground. I don't want to sit over an area of a clear cut that doesn't have any deer in it. So once I've done that until I have a pretty good idea of where the deer are in the clear cut, then I'll come back to the edge of the clear cut and try to pick a tree as close to the edge as possible that gets me overlooking that area where the deer are spending their time. Okay? All right. Then I climb up that tree and make sure that I can actually see some out into that area. Once I do, I'll put a ribbon around that tree at the height that I intend to hunt from. Climb back down, go back out into the clear cut, take a set of hedge clippers, and cut myself some shooting lanes out in the clear cut through that area where the deer are spending most of the time. All right. And then just before the hunting season comes in, like in September, I'll go back and prune the edges of the little, where I've cut limbs off the bushes so that I can see down my shooting lanes. And then I don't bother it again until January. Then, late in the season, the deer have all been pushed back into that same clear cut. They haven't seen or smelled anybody in all likelihood because it's so thick in there. Then I can climb up that tree. I can see specific shooting lanes out in that thick cover. Not just any thick cover, but thick cover that I've spent the time scouting to know that that's where the deer are. And when the deer are in there, they don't just go into that clear cut and lay down and stay in that one place all day. They don't come out of the clear cut. They may get up and move 50 yards and lay back down, but they get up and stretch their legs. They get up and walk around a little in the clear cut. Well, if one crosses one of those shooting lanes, I see him. I usually won't have time to get my gun up and shoot because he just ambles through it. He doesn't see it as a shooting lane, and neither would you if you walked through one of them. You would notice it because it's not but that wide. It may not be but 2 feet wide, but it's enough for me to see the deer when he goes through it. Then whichever direction he was going, I raise my rifle and put it on the other shooting lane, and when he walks into it, I just pull the trigger.
And now, getting all them deers wasn't no accident.
Well, I told you one time before that of about 300,000 deer that we take in Alabama every year, about 295,000 of them were killed by blind, staggering luck. Well, I'll have to admit that I killed my share by luck. I don't cull them if they stagger up on me where I didn't expect them. But I must say that nothing does me good like being able to predict where one's going to be and then have him show up and have me shoot him
at that point
on my terms.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Outdoors with Archie Phillips is now available on video cassette, like Volume 19, Cooking from the Wild. Deer Butchering shows how to butcher deer into steaks, hamburger, and even sausage, while Outdoorsman's Feast is a cooking show of many different game and wild plants to prepare an extravagant feast with all the trimmings. So ask for Outdoors with Archie Phillips, Cooking from the Wild at your local video store or nearby sporting goods dealer.
And Bob, you've got reliable places that I know you've killed deer year after year after year. Do you approach those areas to set up every morning or every day the same, or you got special ways you do this?
Well, one of the most difficult things that we have to deal with on a piece of land like this, where the hunting pressure is really tense, is the amount of movement in the woods and how that movement is patterned. In other words, most of the going and coming, both to stands and to the clubhouse and driving around on the roads by most of the hunters, is the same. Year in and year out, day in and day out, week in and week out. Most everybody goes to their stand the same way every time. And it's amazing how well I've been able to take particular places that themselves may not be particularly good places, but when you approach them correctly, the deer are actually there when you never would have thought they were. A good example probably is the fact that I use a boat to get to my stand a lot of times. Now that stand may be one that's 150 yards from a highway that I could have just as easily parked on the highway and walked into it. The problem is that the deer are used to that. The deer may be laying in a thicket between the highway and the stand. Well, I have some stands just like that I can use this boat to sort of come in from the back door. I can quietly ease up the river using this boat and a 3 horsepower Minn Kota electric motor. I can quietly ease up to the place, climb up the riverbank, go up a tree, and I may be in sight. I've killed deer in the past, standing looking at other hunters walking down the road 200 or 300 yards.
And you
away.
was on the back side.
I was on the back side, and I'd shoot them, and they never knew I was there.
Now, Bob, even though you don't put a lot of strength in the scrapes here, hunting over scrapes, have you got some other techniques that you can lure them out with?
Well, again, during that time of the year, they're more likely to move in the daytime hours. They may not move far, and they're not likely to move out of thick cover if the hunting pressure is very intense. But I think there are some things that I haven't been able to make work very well, but they work some, and I use them. One of those is using a set of rattling horns. Now, that was, I think, first made famous in Texas, but I think it's been proven to work anywhere that there are whitetails. The reason that it doesn't work very well in Alabama, particularly in this part of Alabama, is one, our buck-to-doe ratio is poor. We have way more does than we do bucks. Bucks aren't used to hearing each other fight much, so it's not necessarily a common noise that they hear all the time. So they're not likely to respond to it. The other thing is the hunting pressure. Now, they may be curious as to why 2 deer are off out there fighting 300 yards away, but they're not curious enough to go get shot over it.
They're not going to expose themselves to that.
They're not going to expose themselves because the hunting pressure is so intense. So because of the buck-to-doe ratio being poor and the hunting pressure, rattling or any other form of calling deer is not going to work as well as it would if you were in a place where the deer didn't get hunted.
Outdoors with Archie Phillips is now available on video cassette, like Volume 21, Dangerous Hunting. Boar hunting takes you on a wild boar hunt in South Alabama where the hunter becomes the prey. Alligator hunting takes you to the swamps of Louisiana for a strange but exciting alligator hunt. And Rattlesnake takes you deep in South Alabama for an educational afternoon full of fangs and rattles. So ask for Dangerous Hunting at your local video store.
Hey, Bob, this old big one right here, you had a problem with him, didn't you?
We did that. I shot the deer almost right at the end of the season, like on a Monday before the season went out on a Saturday, and placed the shot a little bit too far back, I later found, and couldn't find the deer. He traveled a long distance, went through a large clear cut, and we lost it in the clear cut. I kept going back day after day and looking, and nothing depresses me quite like losing a big deer I've shot, or at least one I suspect may have been a big one. and finally even rented a plane and went back and flew over the area over and over looking for buzzards, perhaps. At least I thought I'd be able to find the antlers. Couldn't find anything, and 2 weeks after the season went out, I found the deer in the river. He had tried to swim the river, had run straight across. It wasn't far from where I shot him. He crossed the clear cut and went in, jumped in the river, and I found him washed up against an island on a dead wash in the middle of the river.
Well, at least you found him.
We did that.
Well, that's good. In other words, you used this map and plotted your course, put your stand up there just like you normally do it, and this was the results.
Right.
Well, that is great, Bob. And y'all folks stay tuned again for some more Outdoors with Archie Phillips.